Imagine a man sitting alone in the forest. The sun rises behind the mountains and throws long shadows over the dew-covered ground. The birds are singing, the trees sway gently in the breeze, and in that quiet, he listens. But not to the forest. He listens to his breath, to the rhythm of his heart, to the movement of thoughts in his mind. He listens because he knows something has gone quiet in him, but not silent. There is noise inside, but not clarity. And he is searching, not with his eyes, but with presence. To begin the journey of self-mastery, one must first stop moving. Not the feet, not the hands. The stopping must happen in the place where most people never look, inside. And yet, when we sit down, when we close our eyes, what do we find? Not peace, not stillness, but distraction, craving, restlessness, doubt, all of them like visitors in a house that no longer feels like home. These are not strangers. They have lived with us for years, sometimes for lifetimes. And only now, when we try to be still, do we realize they are there. The journey of self-mastery is not about adding something more to yourself. It is about removing what does not belong. Like sculpting a statue from a block of stone, the shape of the masterpiece was always inside. You just need to carve away what hides it. The challenge, however, is that the tools for this work are not external. No hammer, no chisel. Only awareness, only discipline, only silence. And on this path, there are obstacles, hindrances. Not because the path is blocked by others, but because we carry the obstacles with us. When a man walks through the forest carrying a heavy pack, he does not curse the trees for his burden. He learns to take the pack off, to lighten what he carries. And so too, in our inner world, we must recognize what we are carrying that makes the journey heavy. These hindrances are not enemies, they are teachers. But to learn, one must not fight them. One must observe. There was a young monk who once came to an old master and said, "Master, I cannot concentrate. Every time I sit, my mind wanders. I want to be peaceful, but my thoughts are wild like horses." The master smiled and said nothing. He pointed to the river. They walked together and stood at the bank. The master said, "Look at the water." The young monk watched as leaves floated by the current, gentle, steady. "Do you see the surface?" asked the master. "Yes," said the student. "It is calm now. But sometimes it is not." The master nodded. "And when it rains, the surface breaks. But does the river stop flowing?" The monk thought for a moment and shook his head. "No." "Exactly," the master said. "Your mind is the surface. Your being is the river. Let the surface be disturbed, but remember, beneath, it still flows." This is how the first hindrance comes to meet us: desire. Wanting, craving, it does not always appear loud. Sometimes it comes quietly as a preference, as a hope. But when desire enters the heart and takes control, you are no longer sitting. You are chasing. You are pulled away from the present moment. A desire for food, for pleasure, for comfort, for praise. For the future to be different than what it is. And in that moment, the river becomes cloudy. When you chase something, you leave yourself behind. You may catch what you seek, but you lose what is essential. The mind caught in desire cannot see clearly. Like a man chasing the moon's reflection on the water, thinking he can grasp it if he only runs faster. But the faster he runs, the more ripples he creates, and the moon disappears. To master yourself, you must first learn to sit still in the presence of desire. Not to crush it, not to deny it, but to watch it without movement, to see it rise, live, and pass away. Desire is a wave, it comes and goes, but the ocean remains, and you at your deepest level are not the wave, you are the ocean. There is a story of a swordsman who was said to be undefeated, not because he fought many battles, but because he chose not to fight most of them. He knew his strength. He knew his mind, and so he was not lured by provocation. A young challenger once came and said, "If you are strong, fight me." The swordsman said nothing. The boy insulted him. Still, he did not respond. Only after 3 days of silence did he speak. To master the sword, you must first master the hand. To master the hand, you must master the breath. And to master the breath, you must master the mind. I fight no one because the battle already happened inside. And I did not lose. But if desire pulls us forward, the second hindrance does something different. It pushes us down. Aversion, anger, resistance, dislike. We often think that strength is to fight, to react, to hit back. But what kind of strength is required to remain unmoved? To feel the fire rise within and not let it consume you. That is a higher kind of strength. That is mastery. Anger disguises itself as power, but it blinds. It tightens the body, narrows the mind. And most importantly, It disconnects us from presence. You cannot be angry and truly aware at the same time. One excludes the other. The more you feed the flame, the darker the room becomes. When you sit and remember a moment that hurt you, when you think of someone who insulted you, and you feel the tightening in your chest, that is the beginning of the second hindrance. It does not require the person to be present. It only needs the memory. And once it has you, it begins to shape your reality. But consider this. If a man brings a torch into the cave and it burns too bright, he may not see what is in the shadows. He thinks he is illuminating, but he is only blinding himself. Anger is that torch, and the cave is your mind. To see clearly, the light must be steady, not wild, not flickering, not violent. A wise man once said, if you throw hot coals at your enemy, you are the one who gets burned first. This is not a moral lesson. It is a practical one. Holding on to anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other will fall. But in the path of self-mastery, we are not seeking to punish others. We are seeking to free ourselves. The path continues, and on this path, the third hindrance is like a fog. You do not feel it as an enemy. It comes gently like sleep. It is laziness, dullness, the heaviness of the mind. It tells you later, not now. Rest, but not the kind of rest that heals, the kind that sedates, that lulls you into comfort, into stillness without awareness. Have you ever sat in meditation and felt your eyes growing heavy, your posture collapsing, your mind drifting into nothingness? That is not presence, that is absence. And absence is not the same as peace. Self-mastery requires energy, but not the energy of movement, the energy of attention. Like a flame that must be watched or it will flicker and go out. The dull mind is like a field with no wind. Nothing stirs, nothing grows. And though it feels like rest, it is decay. The relentless pursuit of external validation creates an invisible prison that prevents true self-mastery from taking root. We live in a world that constantly measures success through tangible markers, job titles, social media followers, material possessions, and the approval of others. This conditioning runs so deep that most people never pause to question whether these external measurements actually correlate with inner fulfillment. The fundamental error lies in believing that accumulating enough achievements, possessions, or praise will somehow lead to lasting satisfaction. In reality, this creates a never-ending cycle where each accomplishment provides only temporary relief before the hunger for more reemerges. The dopamine-driven nature of external validation means we're constantly chasing the next hit rather than developing sustainable inner resources. Consider how many people grind through miserable jobs for status, maintain exhausting relationships for appearances, or accumulate debt for possessions that lose their luster within weeks. This outward focus becomes a sophisticated distraction from doing the real inner work required for self-mastery. Every moment spent performing for external approval is a moment not spent developing genuine self-knowledge. The illusion becomes particularly dangerous when we start believing our own external persona, mistaking the mask for our true face. Social media has amplified this phenomenon exponentially, creating entire lives curated for consumption rather than authentic expression. The path to breaking this cycle begins with recognizing these external dependencies for what they are, substitutes for the self-worth we should be cultivating internally. Simple but profound questions can reveal the truth. Who would you be without your job title? How would you feel about yourself if no one praised your accomplishments? What activities would you pursue if no one was watching? Answering these honestly often reveals how much of our identity and self-esteem is tied to external factors. The transition from external to internal validation isn't about rejecting worldly success, but about changing our relationship to it. When accomplishments flow from authentic self-expression rather than needy validation seeking, they carry entirely different energy. This shift allows us to appreciate external successes without being dependent on them for our sense of worth. Practical steps include regular digital detoxes to break approval-seeking habits, journaling to distinguish between authentic desires and conditioned wants, and consciously pursuing activities with no external reward simply for the joy of mastery. Over time, we develop what can only be called inner gravity, a self-contained sense of worth that remains stable regardless of external circumstances. This becomes the foundation upon which genuine self-mastery is built. Human beings are wired to avoid discomfort. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism that has become maladaptive in modern life. Our brains still operate as if discomfort equals danger, triggering avoidance behaviors even when the discomfort in question would actually lead to growth. This biological inheritance manifests in countless ways: hitting the snooze button instead of rising early to meditate or exercise, scrolling through social media instead of doing deep work, avoiding difficult conversations that could resolve conflicts. The cumulative effect is a life lived in the shallow end of our potential because we consistently retreat from anything that feels challenging in the moment. What we fail to recognize is that discomfort is actually the signal that growth is available. It's the indicator light showing us where we need to stretch. Physical mastery requires leaning into muscular discomfort. Emotional mastery demands facing repressed feelings. Intellectual mastery necessitates struggling with complex concepts. In each case, the discomfort isn't an obstacle, but the very path itself. Modern convenience culture has exacerbated this tendency by providing endless shortcuts around discomfort. Delivery services that eliminate shopping, dating apps that minimize social risk, entertainment options that require zero mental effort. While individually harmless, collectively these conveniences create an expectation that life shouldn't require strain, which is fundamentally at odds with the reality of human development. The paradox is that by consistently avoiding short-term discomfort, we guarantee long-term suffering in the form of unrealized potential, chronic dissatisfaction, and eventual regret. Breaking this pattern requires retraining our relationship to discomfort itself. Instead of viewing it as something to eliminate, we can learn to see it as valuable feedback, the burning sensation of growth happening. Practical strategies include implementing discomfort challenges, voluntarily taking on cold showers, fasting, or other controlled stressors to rebuild tolerance. More importantly, we can practice pausing when the urge to avoid arises, creating space to consciously choose growth over immediate ease. This mental shift transforms our entire orientation to challenges. Instead of asking, "How can I make this go away?" we begin asking, "What is this here to teach me?" The cumulative effect of consistently choosing productive discomfort over temporary relief is nothing less than the gradual realization of our fullest potential. The stories we tell ourselves about who we are create invisible boundaries that limit our possibilities for growth. These identity narratives form early in life through repeated experiences, feedback from others, and our own interpretations of events. "I'm not athletic. I'm bad with numbers. I'm not creative." These aren't objective truths but accumulated judgments that harden into self-concepts over time. The danger lies in how these self-definitions become self-fulfilling prophecies, causing us to avoid situations that might challenge them and interpret experiences through their distorting lens. A person who identifies as not a morning person will notice every groggy morning as confirmation while dismissing the occasional energetic start as an exception. This confirmation bias reinforces the identity trap, making it increasingly difficult to imagine being otherwise. Even positive identities can become limiting when held too rigidly. The honor student who fears intellectual risks, or the caregiver who neglects their own needs. The path to self-mastery requires recognizing these identities for what they are: temporary constructions rather than permanent realities. Neuroscience confirms this through the concept of neuroplasticity. Our brains remain capable of change throughout life. The identity that says, "I'm undisciplined," is simply a pattern of choices that can be rewritten through different choices. Breaking free begins with awareness, noticing when we use these limiting labels either internally or aloud. Each "I'm just not the kind of person who" is a clue to an identity boundary worth examining. The next step is conscious experimentation, deliberately acting in ways that contradict the old identity while suspending judgment about whether it feels authentic. Authenticity is often the last defense of a limiting identity. We resist change because new behaviors feel awkward or not like me. But who is this me we're trying to remain true to? Usually just the accumulation of past habits. True authenticity isn't about preserving our old self, but about courageously expressing our evolving self. Practical exercises include adopting alter egos to bypass identity resistance, intentionally failing at new activities to desensitize to identity threats, and reframing "I am" statements into "I'm practicing being." This gradual rewiring of self-concept creates space for the emergence of capabilities we previously believed were beyond us. Over time, we come to understand that identity isn't something we are but something we do, a daily practice rather than a fixed entity. This realization is liberation itself. The modern world is an endless buffet of distractions, vying for our attention, fragmenting our mental energy across countless trivial pursuits. This constant partial attention creates a state of chronic cognitive overload where deep focus becomes increasingly difficult. We mistake business for productivity, multitasking for efficiency, and information consumption for learning. The truth is far more sobering. Most people's time and energy are so dispersed they have little left for the focused work required for self-mastery. The average person checks their phone 58 times daily, with many exceeding 100, each interruption carrying a cognitive cost as the brain must reorient to the original task. Social media, 24/7 news cycles, and the expectation of instant responses have trained us to operate in a state of continuous partial attention, leaving little room for the sustained concentration needed for meaningful growth. This dispersion extends beyond digital habits to our physical environments, cluttered spaces that scatter focus, overpacked schedules that prevent depth, and endless low-value commitments that drain energy. The cumulative effect is like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much effort we pour in, little accumulates because it's constantly leaking out. Reclaiming our energy begins with ruthless prioritization, distinguishing between what's truly important and what's merely urgent or habitual. The Pareto principle suggests that 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. Identifying and protecting that critical 20% is essential. Practical strategies include implementing deep work blocks with strict digital boundaries, practicing single tasking instead of multitasking, and regularly auditing how time and energy are actually spent versus how we imagine they're spent. Equally important is learning to tolerate the initial discomfort that comes with focused attention, the itch to check messages, the urge to switch tasks, the anxiety about missing out. These are withdrawal symptoms from our addiction to dispersion, not legitimate reasons to break focus. Over time, as we consistently redirect scattered energy back to priority areas, we experience what Mihaly called flow, that state of complete absorption where time seems to disappear and performance peaks. This concentrated state is where true mastery develops as skills compound through uninterrupted practice and understanding deepens through sustained inquiry. The choice is stark but simple. Continue dispersing energy across countless trivialities or concentrate it on what matters most. The former leads to a life of shallow dabbling, the latter to the profound satisfaction of realized potential. The victim mindset is perhaps the most insidious hindrance to self-mastery because it operates as both cause and justification for stagnation. At its core, it's the belief that our circumstances determine our possibilities, that external factors hold more power over our lives than our own choices and responses. This manifests in countless variations. I can't change because of my upbringing. I'll never succeed because of the system. I would pursue my dreams if only I had X. While these statements often contain elements of truth, life circumstances vary dramatically in difficulty. They become problematic when used as reasons not to try rather than as challenges to overcome. The victim mindset confuses explanation with excuse, mistaking understanding causes for accepting limitations. Neuroscience reveals that this mindset creates a self-reinforcing loop. The more we focus on constraints, the more our brain notices and amplifies them, creating a perceptual filter that screens out opportunities and agency. Breaking free requires what psychologist Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed through effort. This shift transforms challenges from threats to opportunities, effort from proof of inadequacy to the path to mastery, and criticism from personal attacks to useful feedback. Practical steps include monitoring language for victim-oriented phrases. I have to, I can't, they make me. Consciously reframing difficulties as training grounds and taking full responsibility for responses regardless of circumstances. A powerful exercise is to write down all perceived limitations, then brainstorm how each could actually serve growth, how a difficult childhood builds resilience, how financial constraints foster creativity, how physical challenges teach discipline. This isn't about denying hardship but about reclaiming power within it. History brims with examples of individuals who transformed severe limitations into extraordinary strengths. Viktor Frankl finding meaning in Auschwitz, Helen Keller triumphing over multiple disabilities, Nick Vujicic thriving without limbs. Their power came not from their circumstances, but from their relationship to those circumstances. The transition from victim to agent isn't a one-time event, but a daily practice of catching and correcting disempowering thoughts, of choosing response over reaction, of focusing on the actionable rather than the unchangeable. As this mindset solidifies, we discover an astonishing truth, that freedom was never about controlling life's events, but about mastering our interpretation of and response to those events. This realization marks the beginning of true self-mastery. The wind does not ask the mountain to move, it shapes it over time. And the path to self-mastery is no different. Each day, each breath, each moment you return to awareness. This is how the mountain within is shaped, not through force, but through patience, not through speed, but through consistency. There are those who look for shortcuts, who chase enlightenment like a possession, who want to conquer the self as if it were a battlefield. But the truth is quieter. It does not arrive with thunder. It arrives with listening, with understanding, with remembering what was always there beneath the noise. The fourth hindrance comes dressed as restlessness. The body wants to move. The mind leaps ahead. You sit to practice, but you're already at the end of the day. You start to breathe, but you're already planning tomorrow. This constant drifting, this inability to stay, is not because we are weak. It is because we have forgotten how to be still. The mind, like a young child, has not been trained. It must be brought back again and again, not with anger but with kindness. And when the body is still and the restlessness quiets down, there comes another whisper, the fifth hindrance. Doubt. It sits at the doorway of the soul, asking, why are you doing this? Is this the right path? Who do you think you are? And in that voice, if you listen too closely, something fragile begins to crack. Doubt is the thief of resolve. It does not steal loudly. It simply makes you question your step until you stop walking. But even doubt is a teacher, because it shows you what you have not yet made firm. It shows you where your roots do not go deep enough. When the tree of practice sways in the wind of uncertainty, it is not a failure. It is an invitation to go deeper, to return to the beginning, to remember why you started. And so, the five hindrances, desire, aversion, dullness, restlessness, and doubt, they are not chains. They are gates, and each one asks you a question, not with words but with presence. They ask, are you awake? Are you here? Are you willing to face yourself without turning away? Self-mastery is not perfection. It is not the absence of hindrances. It is the ability to see them without becoming them, to sit with the fire and not be burned, to walk through the fog and not be lost, to carry stillness in the heart even while the world moves wildly around you. You do not need to be fearless, only sincere. You do not need to be wise, only willing. The work is not to become someone else, but to return to what you truly are beneath the dust, beneath the fear, beneath the noise. To remember again and again the quiet place in you that has never been broken, and to live from there,